and welcome to my podcast on real relationships. My name is Sophie Passon, and I am a relationship expert, international speaker, and best-selling author of the book Your Other Half. I've decided to start this podcast because, in my opinion, relationships are currently not being portrayed as what they really are. Whether you're watching the news, on TV, or on social media, the perception given to people is wrong. And my aim is to talk about what happens in the real world, talk about real stories, and listen to what real people think, do, and go through, as opposed to creating expectations of something that actually doesn't exist. I may not agree with everything that is said by my guest, but it is their chance to express their opinions and their stories. So here today we have Lucy Tennant, and what we're going to talk about is homosexuality, religion and faith. Hi, Lucy.
Ooh. Hi, Sophie.
Very dodgy subject for some people,
Isn't
I'm sure.
It just?
So, can you tell us a bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. I'm Lucy. I am 28 years old, but I look and act a lot younger. I currently am in a wonderful, good fun flat share in the centre of Winchester, and I work in charities. At the moment, I fundraise for an older person's charity in Hampshire and Dorset.
Okay, thank you very much. So, can you tell us how you found out that you were gay?
How I found out? That's a very interesting question. I would say probably on some level, as a lot of people would say, I guess I've always known. I think when you're younger, you assume that everyone feels the same as you, especially when it comes to things such as fancying people of the same gender. It's not something that's spoken about. So I think my assumption was that everyone feels this way about their friends. That's just what friendship is. But really, it kind of hit home in my late teens, when actually the feelings that I had for some of my female friends, I started to realise were a lot more than friendship, and it was that I was wanting something to develop. But really, definitely was, the first time I kind of really fell for a female friend, and then I suppose it was, the moment that we first acknowledged there was feelings there. That's when it kind of really hit home. So
did you ever have a boyfriend at all? Or?
I did actually, yeah. When I was a teenager, I had a couple of boyfriends. Actually, for considering I was sort of 16, 17, they both lasted longer than a year. So felt like relatively serious relationships for the time. Yeah.
And so what happened with this girl then?
So interestingly enough, we met at the Christian Union at university. We very quickly became very good friends. And I think I realised pretty early on that I definitely wanted it to be something more. And actually, as we just spent more and more time together, we kind of acknowledged that there was an attraction. And I suppose, and then one evening we kissed, and it all kind of, I suppose, went from there. If that makes sense. And we it was a real struggle for both of us. As I mentioned, we were members of the Christian Union, and it was not a safe space to be gay, or I didn't feel that it was. So even though you've got the usual kind of, we're teenagers that are kind of discovering that we are attracted to the same sex, but on top of that, we've got, all our friends are Christian. Everything we know is a very kind of religious, faith-based kind of friendship group and kind of society. And so that kind of added a whole load more questions and pressures and all of that as well. And somehow we did make it through that, and we were together for a long time. But yeah, that was kind of how it started.
But I guess the thing as well, it then, brings the questions of like, what do I want more, the religion side of things and what I believe in, or who I am, which is like, for both these things are quite major.
Yeah, definitely. And up until that point in my entire life, I think I was 20 or 21 at this point, everything had been led by the church. I'd been raised in church. Both my parents and my sister were very heavily involved. And I always, to be honest, thought I would work either in a church or for a Christian charity. And as you say, then all of a sudden, it's kind of a lot of opportunities were taken away from me. I could no longer. So actually at the time, I was applying for a gap year within a Christian organisation. And when they found out about our relationship, that job opportunity that I had been told was essentially secured was taken away from me. Right. And so all of a sudden, it's not just who am I, what do I believe? It was physically, what do I do next with my life? So it does raise a lot of questions, and it did at the time. I think we tried to have it all, I suppose, as one way to put it. You know, we were carrying on with the relationship. We were both still going to church, and still did keep our faith. And there is kind of a big movement of young gay people that are active in the church and do still believe. So, you know, it's sometimes it felt like an absolute choice, and sometimes it felt like you can be gay and be Christian.
Yeah. So how did you come out, as it were? How did you actually just, I mean, you mentioned, like, you know, they've kind of found out, but what about your family, your friends? How did that happen?
Kind of tripped and fell out of the closet, to be honest.
Right.
So
that sounds interesting.
yeah. No, so I mean, so this girl and I have been seeing each other for a little while, and I think our close friendship group were noticing and asking questions. So that kind of came out quite organically. Mm-hmm. In terms of family and kind of other friends, actually with my mum was the first person I kind of actively told. I phoned her up because I didn't have the courage to sit down with her and talk about it. So I phoned her and I just said, "Mum, do you know what? I think I'm gay." And I feel so kind of blessed by her reaction, because she said to me, you know, she obviously, it was a little bit of a shock, and then she said, "You know what? I still love you. God still loves you, and we're still here for you." Mm-hmm. And I think compared to so many experiences I've heard, that is the best reaction ever. And I think that gave me the courage to then, you know, my friends from school rather than university, you know, to just kind of meet up with them and say, okay, this is what's going on. But I often think it's easier because there was a person attached to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And my family had actually met my kind of girlfriend at the time and knew her as my friend. And so actually to say, oh, actually it's a change of situation because I'm actually in love with this girl, it's very different to the concept of I'm gay. It's just, oh, this is a new person in your life. So that, I think, definitely made things easier.
And I think, you know, because I've interviewed someone on the subject who was much older. And I think, you know, we are very lucky. And also this is a country where it's probably more accepted than in others. And I think that, you know, nowadays it's not probably as difficult as it would have been even 15 years ago.
Oh, 100%. And I do think, you know, I went through relative struggles coming out of the closet, mostly around with faith. But I think, well, hopefully in 20, 30 years, it won't even be an issue. It will just be something, you know, that's part of someone's identity that isn't questioned, that isn't, just isn't an issue.
I think it's to be bluntly, I suppose, as a generation dies off, as it were, the next one's beliefs are slightly different, and then they die off, and it just moves on from there, really.
Yeah, definitely. Culture's changing, people's beliefs are changing, and people's understandings of gender and sexuality, are changing. So it's good.
So did you find that your school friends were quite accepting of your new, well, not new sexuality, but you know what I mean, the new you that they didn't know existed?
Yes, it was very definitely split between Christian friends and non-Christian friends. I think non-Christian friends basically went, yeah, you've been a tomboy your whole life, this isn't a surprise to us. Whereas I think the majority of my friends were from within a church or within some kind of Christian circle, and they struggled more with it because, you know, up until the point I came out, I believed that being gay was a sin, because that's what I'd been raised and that's what I had been taught was you know, that was the black and white, right and wrong. That exactly. And so up until that point, people thought I was against it, and you know, we'd all believed the same things. So yeah, I think it was probably a shock more than anything else. And I think because it was kind of, you know, kind of hidden for a little while, I think it was more that people felt lied to and, as I say, surprised rather than the actual coming out itself.
And so can you tell us a bit more about your journey and your relationships?
Yeah, sure. So as I kind of mentioned, I did have a couple of boyfriends when I was kind of late teens. I always thought, again, growing up in this kind of Christian background, I thought you meet someone, you meet a nice boy, you fall in love, you get married, you make babies, you go to church every Sunday. That was kind of what I expected life to be. Yeah, exactly. And then when I met the significant ex, everything changed. And so, yeah, we were together 5.5 years, and it was wonderful. It was very loving and safe, and we found out a lot about ourselves. I think through that relationship, we sort of learned to accept ourselves through kind of this journey of what is being gay. Are we gay? Are we bi?
Yeah, because I guess you were both at the same sort of stages anyway, so you completely went through it together.
Yeah, definitely. And I think having that shared history of church and of Christian friendships, we really were facing challenges and questions at the same time and at the same pace. So we were able to, I guess, support each other through that.
Mm-hmm.
Very sadly, that relationship ended a couple of years ago. I mean, she was only 19 when we got together. I was only 21. And so to have kind of 5.5 years, we'd both kind of changed.
It's quite something.
Yeah. And so since then, I've been dating, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I kind of feel that because of the straight Christian teenage years I led, I missed out on what I would consider probably a relatively pivotal part of growing up, which is dating.
Yeah.
You know, I was in relationships with men, then I was in a long-term relationship with a woman. And so now I kind of feel that, you know, meeting lots of different people, having those dating experiences, it's good fun. And I think it's also important to learn who you are, to learn kind of what you like, who you like, and just, meet different people and have different experiences.
And so I've got an interesting question for you, because you're someone I know, she's got you older, she's completely straight, there's no being gay there, but she's also completely Christian. And one of the things that she said is that she will not date a non-Christian person. What about you then? What is it, something that is essential to you, or is it nice to have?
I suppose what I haven't really conveyed yet in this conversation is that I wouldn't consider myself a Christian anymore.
Okay.
I feel that, So whilst I was in the long-term relationship, as I kind of mentioned, we did try and keep going to church. And I just felt that...
Did you feel rejected when you were going?
Yeah. I mean, so the church we were going to at the time, when they found out about us, which wasn't our decision to tell them, it was kind of spoken about in the way that it often is in kind of Christian circles. And they brought us in for a meeting and essentially planned a prayer healing seminar for us, which I was not on board with. And I think...
But to make you straight again, as it were? Or...
Yeah.
Right,
well, that was my understanding of what they were kind of planning to do. And so, even after that, I tried to keep going to church, and I still had the faith that Jesus existed, about God and that kind of thing. But I think over time, I've only ever known Christianity. That's all I was brought up in. That's what I was told was truth. And all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, I thought, I'm actually going to think about this for myself. I'm going to research it myself. Mm-hmm. And I think through doing that, through thinking more pragmatically, more scientifically, I came to the kind of conclusion that for me, I don't think it's true, and I don't want to live that lifestyle. So yes, when I was a practicing Christian, finding a partner that was also Christian was, I wouldn't consider dating someone that wasn't. But now, I'm probably the other way around. I wouldn't date someone that's a Christian, because actually I found my experiences of the church relatively damaging.
Fair enough. And that's an interesting question, because, you know, I was raised as a Catholic, just because in France it's just the way it is. And whilst I've never experienced prejudice in any way, shape or form in that way, some of the things I witnessed and saw, I didn't particularly, it's not enjoy, it's just agree with, shall we say, without going into long stories and, you know, that's got nothing to do with price of cheese. But I guess my own journey has also been to not to reassess, because I was never, I was actually, when I was very young, I was quite practicing and all the rest of it. But I think as I got older, I really changed my views, not necessarily because of a science behind it, but more because my belief is more that there is something bigger than us, but we all call it something differently, and we all go by different rules and different books, as it were.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think for some people, faith is very important, and it drastically improves their life. And I think, I don't know. Yeah, it's still something I'm working through, to be honest. But I agree with you. Different people have different kind of ideas of what that higher being is.
I just feel, for me, I just felt that it was a little bit too rigid, and I wasn't very happy with some of the discriminations that were taking place, and how, for me, in my experience, there was really like there was I can't say the word, hypocritical.
Yep.
In a lot of ways, and
Yeah.
so that's me anyway. So, would you say that through the one dating, I know that you've experienced a lot of pressure in your relationship, but through the dating and all the rest of it, would you say that there is more pressure in a gay relationship?
More pressure? I think there can be. I suppose there's lots of different ways to answer that question. So in my long-term relationship, especially because of the background we'd come from, I felt that there was pressure to almost prove that we are a nice, normal couple. Just because we're two women, look at how much we can succeed and how we can live, the life that you've expected for me. Even though, I'm planning on marrying a woman rather than man, look how much I can achieve. So I suppose, yes, in that sense, there is a certain amount of pressure to show that it's not weird. It's a normal thing that happens when it's, as we acknowledged, it is becoming a lot more mainstream, so much more accepted, which is great, but it's still not the norm. And I think people still take a second glance. So there is that pressure to prove we can still make each other happy. Yeah.
And in terms of dating, what have you found? What's been your experience so far?
Good question. I don't know. Girls are all different, I guess.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I suppose I don't really have anything to compare it to. It's not like I ever really dated men. So
yeah, true.
Yeah.
I just think that if, in the world, for instance, of online dating, where the straight online dating world, shall we call it, it's very interesting actually, because a lot of the men have got preconceived ideas about women, and women have got pretty much the same preconceived ideas about the men. But both sexes don't actually know that, nor acknowledge that at all. So men seem to think that it's more difficult for them, and women also seem to think it's more difficult for them. There's different kind of like slants on the way they use words. So, for instance, a man who says that is 5'8" is likely to be 5'6". A woman who calls herself bubbly is likely to maybe have a few more pounds than she'd like. There's a few nuances, and I don't mean to be controversial here. It's just something I have, experienced, seen through my work, through whatever it is. It's what I've come to realise. Would you say
I see what you mean?
Similar stuff, or?
I suppose so. I can only compare kind of because I've been doing online dating. I can compare my experience with that of my housemate, and I think when I've been chatting to girls online before meeting them in person, there's a lot more conversation before we arrange to meet up.
Okay.
Whereas I think when it's, I mean, again, only with this one comparison, I think it's probably guys and girls will meet up slightly quicker for whatever reason that is. So I think by the time I've met kind of people, I feel like I've known them, not only from a safety perspective, in terms of making sure we're friends on Facebook. I know that they're who they say they are. We will have spoken on the phone or video chatted, so I know, what they look like and all that kind of stuff. So I think it kind of feels different. That's
just an interesting point, because you see, and I'm a woman, but obviously I'm not gay. I would never add someone on Facebook until I've really known them for a long time and we were going to date, as it were.
Yeah.
And I say that at the same time, some years ago when I was dating, there was a chat that actually we had a date and it just wasn't there. But, potentially there was friendship, and I introduced him to a social group, and I think we're still friends on Facebook. But apart from him, I would never, ever have added anybody before meeting them.
I suppose it is very different when it's two girls, because you know that if it's not going to be romantic, it could very easily be friendship. Whereas you probably wouldn't necessarily, you're not looking for a male friend when you go online dating, you're looking for a potential partner. And so I think that's where it does differ, because this is not to kind of put down straight relationships, but I think it's probably easier to be best friends with your partner when they're the same gender, just because you have that much more in common, or at least that's kind of my perception of it anyway.
I think
maybe that's because I'm gay.
It's an interesting thing because I used to run events for single people. And one of the things that a lot of people used to say was that they wanted to meet, let's say, Prince Charming, Princess Charming, whatever, there and then. And actually, I found that, and I used to say to them that I found it quite short-sighted. Because if you meet someone, same sex, different sex, whatever, if you get on, they've got friends. And if you get on, it's like you're going to get on with their friends, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And, the average person, I know that, we met through the networking world, but the average person that doesn't do that, because we probably know more people than normal people, shall we say, still knows on average of 300 people, whether it's neighbours, colleagues, friends, school friends, family, whatever, and probably even more now with Facebook. So if you get on with one person, it is likely, if you met their friends, you'd get on with one of their friends.
Yeah, true. And I think, especially in a world where we do a lot of our kind of socializing behind a screen, actually just meeting one person and expanding your social circle in that way is even more important. And as you say, opens more doors, more opportunities.
And so, tell me, obviously being gay, do you want kids?
Yes, I think I do. I have to, when...
Obviously, you need the right person.
Yeah. So when I was younger, when I was intending to marry a man, I suppose I always just assumed that would be part of the future, but never really thought about it. I didn't ever think about myself pregnant. It wasn't something I particularly wanted. I think, when I was with kind of my significant ex, I definitely wanted her children. I was so excited at the thought of having a mini her that I could raise and be a parent to. I think since then, I still want kids. I don't know if I want to give birth to them or if it's going to depend on who I end up with, or maybe I'll end up, I don't know, adopting a kid on my own or something. I think it is something that I really do see in my future in whatever way it happens.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes adoption is overlooked. And actually, I know a couple who they had a child, their child, as it were, normally, or normal way, shall we say.
Yeah.
And instead of having a second one, they adopted. And I found that quite admirable, really.
We had this really funny conversation because I always said we should adopt a really gorgeous little black baby from Africa and save it from whatever. And my ex always said, no, this kid's going to have enough problems having gay parents. We can't be a different race to it as well.
Oh, yes. And you see, it's funny, isn't it? Because actually, it's only the perception, because I'm sure the baby would just be quite happy to just have the parents.
Yeah, definitely. I think if it's loved, that's all you can do, really.
Exactly. And so in terms of self-acceptance, have you found it difficult to deal with?
Yes, definitely. I've been through a lot of therapy talking about all this kind of stuff. So, it's taken a long journey to get here and to say this. So as I kind of touched on, I think when I was in the relationship, I felt like we needed to conform to some kind of, preconceived idea of what is a normal relationship. So I think in that, I definitely took on a more masculine role. And so I felt, okay, well, I'm gay now. So, and I'm with a very feminine woman, so I will be the man and I will climb ladders and kill spiders and those very stereotypical things. And I think it's only since coming out of that relationship that I'm accepting, okay, maybe I do have that slightly more masculine side, but I'm still definitely very much a woman. And you can be both things. They don't, and I think it's taking a long time. And actually being on my own for an extended period of time, which I hadn't been for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years, is the only time really when you get to know yourself. And so I think, over the past few months, I've done a lot of, these are the good things about me. These are the things I need to work on. And not just to do with sexuality or relationships, but just
in general,
accepting yourself in entirety. And I think now, sometimes, those days when you wake up and you just want to be invisible, you want to be completely normal. And I just think because of my sexuality and because I dress relatively kind of androgynously, that I can't be invisible, I feel. And so some days that's difficult to accept when I just want to blend in and not stand out. but that's part of my journey. So
at the same time, you call it normal. What is normal?
Yeah, good question.
There's no such thing. I think a lot of the time we feel we want to fit into something, and actually there is nothing to fit into. No one is normal. As soon as you start scratching the surface of anyone, you soon find out there is no normal.
That's very true.
I mean, I kind of get what you're saying, because sometimes, as you say, in the way you dress. I remember one particular time I went back to France. I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago. It was a Christmas time anyway. They were slightly older. Anyway, doesn't matter. And because, the fashion's slightly different, I did feel like I was standing out a little bit. And that I'm not going to say I looked foreign, as it were, but I definitely looked different.
Yeah.
And I get what you're saying, but at the same time, I feel quite proud that, I was comfortable in my own skin to be that.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's, I'm so much further closer to feeling like that than I was, a year ago, 18 months ago. But yeah, I'm still relatively young and it's still a journey. But yeah, there's definitely advantages to not necessarily standing out, but being unique and individual. And I think I do kind of sort of own that individual style. And especially as you talked about, we do a lot of networking. I think it's beneficial. It makes you memorable, doesn't it?
Oh, completely. So what would be your advice to someone who was worried about coming out?
I would say life gets better. Even if you get a bad reaction from some people, even if you get a bad reaction from a lot of people, there are more people in the world that will accept you and will love you more because you're being who you are. And I think it may be worth the risk of losing a couple of friends to be a lot more comfortable in yourself. Even before I fully accepted or realized that I was gay, I always felt like I was uncomfortable or like I was hiding something, and I didn't know what it was. And since then, it's like a physical layer has been lifted. I feel like I can walk stronger, walk taller, and be more myself, and I can say things without fear of letting out this big secret. And so I would say, tell a few trusted people first, see that you get a positive reaction, see that people still love you, and then come out. But I think what people often don't realize, and I've heard people say this on telly and on podcasts and things before, is that it's not just you come out and you tell people you're gay. You have to come out constantly. If you're living with your same-sex partner, you have to come out every time a new plumber comes over and introduce them as your wife or whatever. And so it is a journey, and it does feel a bit weird, but it gets so much easier every time you tell someone that you're seeing someone of the same gender. It gets much easier.
Fair enough. And so finally, what would your advice be to people who feel prejudiced? Oh, I can't say it now. Prejudiced.
It's an interesting one, because I'm really mixed, because I still feel quite angry towards some people that, towards kind of, I suppose, the church in general as a body, about kind of the prejudices that were for me and the kind of way I felt excluded from that. But at the same time, can completely understand where they're coming from, because if you've been brought up being told this is what's right and this is what's wrong, how are you going to know to question that? So I suppose it's just open your mind, think about it from different perspectives. And we all have opinions of what's right and wrong. And if you think about all the options and still think that, for example, that my sexuality is wrong, then that's your prerogative to have that opinion. Obviously, I don't agree with it, but do that, but don't try and push it on me. And I won't try and push my sexuality on you. That's how we can do it. It's just, I suppose it's respect, isn't it? It's respect each other's opinions, beliefs, attitudes. Yeah.
Well, Lucy, thank you so much for your time.
Well, thanks for having me.
Lovely talking to you. So that is it for today. Thank you again. And if you've enjoyed the show, then please subscribe, leave us a review, and more importantly, come back for the next episode. Thank you.
Lovely. Thanks, Sophie.